The Olsinski Law Firm is an official sponsor of Top Bin 90, specializing in personal injury, criminal defense, DWI, family law, and workers' compensation. The Olsinski Law Firm provides professional, trusted legal services to clients facing a variety of challenges. With a team of experienced attorneys dedicated to protecting your rights, the Olsinski Law Firm is the legal support you can count on.
Hi, I'm Justin Olsinski, the founding partner of the Olsinski Law Firm. Me and my wife started this firm back in 2010 with the sole purpose of providing excellent service to our clients, giving our clients a personal touch because we had worked in bigger firms where we saw that not happening. We handle criminal defense matters, civil personal injury, wrongful death, workers' comp, and family law matters. We have a team of attorneys that care about the outcome of your case, and we will fight to make sure that you get the justice you deserve.
I mean, he rotated about as I would say pretty as heavy as you could given the circumstances. I mean, there were still a few more options. I guess he could have technically started like Koulibaly for Diani or something like that, but it was a pretty heavily rotated squad, especially once you compare it to Atlanta, and then also especially once you compared it to most of the other U.S. Open Cup MLS teams. I would say for the most part, a lot of teams played not maybe their best 11, but a pretty strong 11 that included at least a DP, if not a couple of them. And then not just like the DP. Like in Charlotte's case, Lilabada is a DP, but he's not really consistently producing, not starting. Like Colorado still started like Navajo, who's like contending for Golden Boot. So like there's a difference between like Dean could be like, well, we started a DP, but it's like there's a difference.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think there's just all these elements of rotation that Dean went through and Charlotte FC went through that a lot of the other teams took this competition a lot more seriously. And I think this was a moment that Charlotte could have, given the fact that the draw was so heavily in their favor to advance and get them to their first quarterfinal in U.S. Open Cup and only their second quarterfinal ever.
Yeah, Billy, we talked a little bit about that, you know. taking that gamble. I mean, me and I was in the camp that like he's for sure gonna have a couple of players that are starters, right, of that caliber, just in case the game goes wrong. And Brian said, I don't think so. He was correct at the end of the day. Um, talk to us about this disappointment against Atlanta.
I mean, it's super disappointing. Same spot you've seen Charlotte in every single time. They've made it to the U.S. Open Cup. They've gotten in. They've been knocked out round of 16 every time. So you would have thought that maybe this time, maybe it could have been different, but Dean Smith just decided to stick with what he usually does in the competition. Didn't seem to take it as seriously. No matter what he says, I mean, what you see, what he put out there is saying something different than what he says in the post game. It's like he may believe that team can win, but this is a competition that you should be taking seriously. You should be putting your best team out there. Well, not your best team, but like some of your best players.
Yeah, for sure. And so we talked about this, like how he would experience more criticism and more pressure if they lost this Open Cup game, because it was all in their favor, as we mentioned last week. And you got to have some more decision makers. And for him, I want to say, to go out of his way to mention some of these things lets us know a little bit that, like, okay, we're kind of in the right thinking, where like it feels like he has to justify that he's not heavily rotating when we can clearly see it. For me, if you would have told me you're going to go through this week, you're going to play a strong team, win against Atlanta, and then lose whatever 3-4-0 against New England because you rotated that game and you put I think most people would have been happy, because this is year 3, and I think the expectations are higher, right? And it just, again, it feels like, one, Charlotte's not in a good moment, and two, we're not in a good moment and losing traction in places where we can actually go deep. I mean, the U.S. Open Cup should be a priority for you. Talked about it last week. Look at Nashville, what that did for them and the turnaround on their team. And, it feels like a heavy opportunity missed again by Charlotte FC against a mid-Atlanta team too, which makes it even more annoying.
Yeah, and I think that's why I ended up making that post that I made post-game with the clip that I think, Jorge, it was a question that you asked him about just concerns about taking the tournament seriously, I think it was, and that was Dean's response was, hey, if we had beat Atlanta, they would have gotten the same like sort of rhetoric from their fans that they had rotated and all this stuff. And that's when I made the post, because I don't know if Dean just didn't realize. There's no way that like his video analysts and everybody scouting Atlanta didn't know that like they had not maybe their strongest 11, but Miranchuk has definitely been arguably their best player, and he showed it tonight. I mean, and that's kind of what I think Charlotte was missing. Like a Pep Biel, somebody who could just for like 15 minutes give you that moment, give you that worldy moment, take advantage of a defender who makes a mistake, like in that situation, Privet steps when he should have stayed back. Miranchuk does a 1-2, gets into the box, has a little bit of space on Schnegg, and puts it in. Like those kind of moments that you need a Pep Biel to identify and take advantage of those situations. And I think that's where it was just lacking. I mean, it was 81% of Atlanta's MLS minutes were available in that game, and Charlotte only had 38%. So like that's the difference. It's like double the amount of your MLS minutes were available to one team versus the other. And I think that's when I really started to hammer Dean a little bit, was just like that's mixed messaging to your fan base as to what is actually happening, and just the sign of like, you could say there's the level of importance that you feel for the competition, that the team you put out there is built to manage it or whatnot. But it's like, when you see other MLS teams, the majority of them playing pretty close to their starting 11, and at this point deciding to take this competition seriously, and especially the teams that are kind of down and out, Orlando, St. Louis. Now it makes sense for them to really take it seriously, like where they should be almost rotating and focusing solely on the U.S. Open Cup, because they're pretty much, at this point, it's already early in the season, but close to out of the playoff picture, like very seriously. But at the same time, for Charlotte, you'd think they would still at this point be like, hey, we have an opportunity to at least make a deep run and win a trophy, which is still something that Charlotte hasn't done.
Exactly. Yeah, so, absolutely. And I think Atlanta United are playing Orlando next, who also haven't been great this season.
Yeah.
So like the pathway, like remember in 2025 where 2024, where they preached if we would have beaten Orlando, we would have went to the MLS Cup final. Remember, saying like the path was there. Okay, well the path was here, to go to at least the semifinal, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so like if you can cast that kind of vision without even playing the rest of the games, you should be casting that same vision here.
Yeah.
Right. And so I do think like it's time to be a little bit more critical, right? Because we have different expectations now.
Yeah.
And so year 3, like we need to see an improvement in this team, and we aren't seeing it, and the results, aren't doing Charlotte FC any favors, and so with that said, anything else before we move on from the topic of Atlanta United and the Open Cup?
I just think one last point is that in MLS, and I think this is another reason why so many coaches focused on winning and trying to advance in the U.S. Open Cup this round specifically, even though it might seem early to say Dean Smith, who tended to rotate his squads during tournaments in England. MLS, you can recover your spot in the standings.
Absolutely.
Way later. And I think even Dean's mentioned this. Is like it really just comes down to the final 10 games. I think he's actually said that like almost verbatim. And so like if you have that acknowledgement, like, hey, like as long as you're kind of pace, and depending on how your final stretch of games goes, like that's when the season really kicks off. So if that's the case, you definitely have the luxury and the flexibility to figure out how to combine your MLS season with a good cup run.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, spot on there. Billy, anything else before we move on?
I'd say just with a disappointing result like that, they have to show out in the Leagues Cup. You have to at least get out of the group stage in the Leagues Cup.
Good shout.
Yeah. And so, it'll be a interesting last couple of games that we have coming up for Charlotte FC before the World Cup, which it's going to be very interesting how that plays out, because it'll be a full stop for almost 2 months.
Yeah.
And so, yes. And then we moved on to a game that, wasn't much better, in terms of a result, which was against New England. Charlotte FC lose 1-0 in New England. And so a really tough pill to swallow. It looked like they were better, especially the first half.
Yeah.
I remember Pep Biel had a really good chance. Toklomati hit the post. And so, but again, like if you're not taking your chances, right, things can happen. And then at the end of that match, that penalty, which was a very dicey penalty to give, in stoppage time, New England pulls it from Charlotte under the rug 1-0. First, let's talk about the penalty. Billy, penalty or no penalty for you?
I'd lean no penalty just from the way it hit the arm. It's not like he didn't move his arm out there with the intention of hitting it. It hit 2 arms on the play. It hit Morrison when he's sliding, and then it deflected off of Westy and then hit his arm. So it's like neither of those are like, obviously they're not a natural position out there, but like one deflected off and then hit it, and then one he's sliding, bracing himself on the ground.
Yeah, like where are you supposed to put your arms in those situations, Brian?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky situation, and that's one thing that Ashley brought up in the post-match presser. I think the one other issue, though, is just the ref blew the whistle early, and I mean, Fagundes ended up scoring the goal, so I do feel like it's – the one thing about it being kind of a non-factor is, like, I'm pretty sure, like, if they just let the play run out, like, Fagundes drills the shot and they're up
so?
one.
I feel like that last second they all kind of
stopped.
Yeah,
enough of a time for him to not drill it.
I don't know, but like
tough.
Yeah, like because they didn't like continue the sequence. I felt when they stopped and he shot it, you know. But like who knows if like somebody would have gotten in the way,
yeah,
you know?
Maybe it's super bang across the board there. I think the main thing, and I props to Dean for this because I think I've hammered him a decent amount when it comes to like the refereeing and stuff like that. He didn't go that route and he pivoted towards like there were plenty of other opportunities outside of that play by Morrison for them to figure out how to win this game. And it wasn't down to this play or Morrison's play in that moment. It was down to like the team and figuring out how to just work through some of the mistakes that they didn't do, you know, and or like getting the finishes that they didn't, you know, make happen and take advantage of the moment. And so I think, you know, you leave yourself open to a moment like this, and you could call it bad luck, good luck, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, like you leave it 0-0 on the road when you had moments in the first half, especially. They didn't have many in the second half. They had those moments in the first half, and that was their prime. And then after that, just not being able to take advantage of it, you leave yourself in that situation.
Yeah, and given also all the injuries in the back line recently, obviously Harry Toffolo, Tim Ream, they continue that partnership of Morrison Ajiman and Andrew Privet, right? And I mean, Schnegg's come in and I think he's looked decent, right? And so, what did you make, Billy, of that back line? It felt like an improvement this past weekend, although they gave up a penalty late.
Yeah, it was a major improvement. I thought that Morrison and Privet looked good next to each other as opposed to what we had seen over the past few games from that duo of center backs. I thought Schnegg is going in, replacing Toffolo, is much better than what we had last year. Whenever we saw a fullback get injured, it was a disaster when that would have happened last year. We were scrambling to have anyone do something, and I thought that he played pretty well for a second choice left back out there. Like, he played decent.
Nice.
Yeah.
Brian?
He did have I feel like he had a tough assignment. I think Langoni and Will Sands on that side, both, they looked sharp.
Yeah.
And they put a lot of pressure on him. And so there was a lot of 1v1 situations that Byrne on the other side just didn't have to deal with as much. And so I think there were definitely moments when his 1v1 defending was questionable. There was the yellow card he received in the second half, and just a couple other situations where Langoni just seemed to have a little bit more fight than maybe Schnegg expected. But at the same time, it's his first start. I mean, it just takes a second to get up to speed. So let's see. He's going to have a couple more runs out there. It seems like Toffolo, he's not training yet. He's going to have some more chances to kind of prove that he can maybe even compete for that starting job.
Yeah, for sure. And then let's talk a little bit about this offensive line too, as well. I mean, how concerned are you now? 200 minutes without a goal. I feel like Idan Toklomati isn't really there.
Yep.
Obviously, you have the situation with Wilfred Zaha right now. How concerned should we be about this offensive power for Charlotte FC?
Yeah, I do feel like that was the big concern for me, was like they didn't take advantage of the chances they had. Now, obviously, you still want to create more chances. They had probably the two biggest of either team in the first half, but they didn't have a ton of volume still. They had to still pick their moments. So I think this is one, again, the consistent frustrations that we have voiced is that they have to kind of be super clinical and efficient with the chances they get because they just don't get a lot of them. And so this is just another example of that where Toklomati had maybe one or two shots, limited amount of touches. The combination play that I did see from him, Biel, and Zaha at times was really sharp, and ideally, we continue to see more of that as they keep playing together. I will say also, I feel like the defensive improvement came from the attacking line being way better at pressing at the right times. I feel like in the forward line and the midfield line, the activity and the rotation was really good to help give the back line some support so they didn't seem as isolated as they had been in weeks past. So that side was good. You got to turn that pressure off the ball into more and more chances on the ball. And so you still have to, you could kind of see it in Toklomati's eyes, like after that shot hit the crossbar, you could the shot, the camera panned to him, and you can kind of see it a little bit, like that was a good a good one that I really let slide, and so I feel like those could end up adding up. A young kid who's wearing the 9, that kit is going to keep wearing heavy, especially if you're not getting the goals.
Absolutely, especially Billy right now in a time where it feels like we need Charlotte to find answers to kind of get out of this slump. I think momentum for me is a real thing, right? When you have it positive, aka that 9 stretch, and when you have it negative, like right now, I think this probably is, and like Brian said, it felt like the first time I felt like Dean felt a little defeated as well, because they played better, but they weren't able to pull a result, and when you have that negative momentum, it's hard to flip that switch.
Yeah, like we were talking last week with the negative momentum with how allowing the goals into allowing more goals, and it seems like they improved the defense this week, but the negative momentum flipped from being the defense into the attack. Like, they had 9 total shots, and 4 of them were attackers. They had more shots from defenders than they had attackers. Both of their starting wingers, neither of them had a shot. Zaha didn't have a shot, and Vargas didn't have a shot all game. So, you need your wingers, you need your attackers, they're starting especially, to get those chances. They need to be aggressive enough to be able to get those shots. They need to be in areas to where they are more likely to score goals. Like Brian was saying, turn that pressure off ball into stuff on ball. Like you have to, like that's your primary job. You're an attacker. Your job is to score goals.
Absolutely. Brian, we saw Archie Goodwin come in, Liel Abada, and Brant Bronico.
Yeah.
You know, and so out of those three players, I mean, like, Brant's game isn't to, score goals, Liel Abada, we know his situation. Archie Goodwin, right, is kind of the guy that's has kind of helped out recently, and so, for me, it stood out that both Rodolfo Aloko and Luca De La Torre didn't get any minutes.
Yeah, my guess is that, and this has to be also why Archie came in so late as well, because he came in like, I think it was like the 88th minute, which is like not really enough. I mean, it ended up being a decent amount of run out because you had 10 minutes of stoppage time after the whole PK fiasco and everything else. But I just feel like Dean didn't give Archie enough run out or Aloko or Luca De La Torre any, and I think part of that was because they had a decent amount of run in the U.S. Open Cup, or Aloko the few games before that. That's my speculation, because I feel like Archie should almost be on like a 60-30 minute split with Toklo, just as a standard.
Yeah.
Almost like what we saw last year with Toklo and Ajiman.
Right.
It was just like 60-30 minutes, but it was almost just like standard it was almost like as if he set the lineup that way, where just one guy's going to get 60, you're going to have your run, and then the other guy's going to come in and kind of bring a spark of energy for that decent amount of like the end stretch, and just kind of try to close the game out and just put a little extra pressure on the center backs. And I feel like that should almost be par for the course right now, because you have two guys that are capable of bringing an extra bit of juice, regardless if it's from the starting 11 or off the bench. I feel like we've seen them both bring a spark when they come off the bench. And so giving him a decent amount of run out to actually make something happen, I think for me is key. I feel like they put in Archie way too late. Abada and Bronico also came in kind of late. I think part of that was probably just Dean feeling like the squad played pretty well through 78 minutes, and so wanted to keep it consistent. But at the same time, you need 0-0, and you need to get a result. So it doesn't really matter how well you feel like the vibes are, the things are going on the field. You got to be able to bring that little extra and find a way to get a result over the line and lock it in, especially when things aren't going well, because now you're sitting in the post-match presser saying, we played well enough to get a result, but we didn't, which is okay if things are going decent.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you just come off 2-4.
That was about to be my next point.
And so, like, it's just way too much of a let-off in terms of you just can't talk about a result or a performance being good, but the result not being there when none of your results are getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's where I go back to, like, it wouldn't matter as much if you would have won against Atlanta too, right? Where you're like, okay, well, you can always bounce back in the league, like you mentioned, but like you can't, like you're out of the Open Cup. So, I mean, to me, it's like two different forms of frustration. One, how you got eliminated in the Open Cup, and now this, where I even think, to be honest with you, Billy, a 0-0 in New England, I would have semi been okay with. Like okay, like they've stopped that negative, and like let's bounce back at home.
Yeah, like you would have at least gotten a point out of it.
Yeah.
You go on the skid, your rough stretch of games, and then now you're continuing that stretch of games. It's another loss instead of getting a point if you could have gotten 0-0. Now it's 4 losses in a row, and now you got to go home and hope you can bounce back at home. When if you could have salvaged the point on the road, it maybe would have made it a little bit easier. Felt like the momentum was swinging back in your direction, but now with the last second goal too, it's just a rough outcome.
Yeah, and a clean sheet too. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah,
After you've
that's a
given
good
up
point.
10 goals in 3 games or something like that with the Open Cup game. So if you come back and get a clean sheet, I think also that goes a long way, regardless of if it's a win or not.
Nice. Brian, Dean was able to pick this team up after a really negative stretch last year, right? And then they went on that 9-game winning streak. What does Charlotte FC have to do right now to kind of be able to turn that tide again?
Well, I mean, I think first step is continue to bring the energy that they did in this last game. I do think like they played well, especially in that first half. If you keep getting starts like that and then just increase the volume in terms of chances, they should be okay. Like they should be able. Those chances eventually will turn into goals. It's just a matter of whether or not they actually do. We've seen this team find ways to get some momentum and get chances, but then in the key moments is when they tend to fizzle out. Playoffs being the prime example. So I have a decent amount of confidence that Dean will figure out how to accrue the points needed to keep their floor high. That's what he's done. And when you do that for a couple of years, like I will weight consistency in your favor. I'll say, like, okay, you clearly are a 50-point coach. You're capable of finding ways to get the results you need and get into the playoffs and make it to this part of the standings. But at the same time, like, that's no longer the question that's being asked of Dean or this team anymore. It's trophies, qualifying for Champions Cup, these kind of questions. And I think that has nowhere near been answered.
Yeah.
I think that's the real question that he's got to figure out. Like, what is that evolution? We've talked about evolution a decent amount. Like, how does that come about? Is it from Luca De La Torre actually figuring out how to get him fitting into this group? Because that hasn't happened. Like, is it a Loco finding another level? I'm not really sure. Like, I think that's the question that Dean has to answer this year. I still have confidence that this team has a high floor because that's just what he's proven. And it's just, but you got to be able to start hitting the ceiling. Otherwise, there will be a time when that floor caves on you, as it does for anybody. Just because teams have off years. Jim Curtin in Philadelphia, Oscar Pereira this year in Orlando. Like, a lot of the high floor coaches eventually have a drop off. And so if you don't have a ceiling that you can prove, like, hey, this is like why I stick around, like, you got to be able to show that too.
Absolutely. Billy, what needs to change for Charlotte FC to kind of go back to that positive momentum?
I think just they need to see a positive result. They need to see goals hit the back of the net. They need something positive that they can latch onto and just build off of, because it doesn't seem like there's been much of that. Like Brian mentioned earlier, the clean, like possibly would have keeping a clean sheet before the penalty would have been something to build off of. And now that's not there. They need something they can build off of.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. Right. And so some sort of spark. So that's where I think I see, like, what you mentioned about Tocolomanti. I think a lot of players are feeling it right now, and I think even the nature of this result is something that they have to work on now. Like, I guess this is where the mental part of the game kind of plays in. Like, how quickly can you get over that? Like, the perfect example for me of that has been Mo Salah at, like, Liverpool. Like, he's missed before, like, some clear goals, but then 5 minutes later he finds the back of the net. Right. And so I'm like, that's just elite mentality, right? To kind of put that in the back of your mind and say, okay, well, I missed it, but let's flip that switch. And I feel like Charlotte FC needs that right now. How can I flip the switch, right? It doesn't matter these past results. It's how do we go into Cincinnati? Again, it goes back to this weekend for me is going to be more about the result versus actually how they play. Because right now they need a positive result to get out of this slump.
I think one more would be like a lead. Just because I don't think they've had a lead since the New York game.
Oof.
So I think that would also be a good one. Like, if it's been 4 straight games without even having a lead or defending from the front, I think, like you said, getting a goal, but getting that first goal.
Yeah, that's kind of insane, dude. That's a great pull from you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, as I was mentioning, kind of these last couple of games. Right before the World Cup, Charlotte plays FC Cincinnati, New York City again at home, then they play Toronto at home, and then they play New England. So the positive right here is a 4 home game stretch, right? And so what kind of points, how many points do you see Charlotte FC kind of pulling? What do they need in terms of, one, to bounce out of this negative streak that they're in, and 2, to kind of end in a decent spot, heading into the World Cup?
Yeah, I think they need to get at least 8 points. And I tried to run some of the math down. I think they need minimum 8. Like, that's got to be the floor. That gets them back kind of in that, like, 1.5 point average going into the break, and that gets them back towards that 50-point floor. That, I think that's what Dean's main metric is like making sure that that's the floor. So you need 8. That means 2 wins, 2 draws, combinations of something like that. I think really expectations should be 9 or 10 points. I think really it should be like a really strong run where you're getting at least 3 wins. So, and then that gives them a little bit more momentum going into the break. But you have to have a strong run of games here. And I do expect them to. I mean, these are a couple of tough opponents. FC Cincinnati's tricky this weekend for sure, just because they have really talented players. New York as well is kind of an interesting spot. And then you got Toronto and New England. I think the New England one becomes really interesting because if you get swept by both them and Nashville this early in the season, that's tough. So I think that's because they're both ahead of you and you've already been swept by them. So I think those games are kind of, that's the situation you're kind of dealing with. But I think you got to have 8 minimum.
Nice. Billy?
I agree. I was going to also say 8. Ideally, you'd like to see 12.
Yeah.
I don't know how likely that is. 8 minimum, maybe 9 or 10. 9 or 10 would be successful.
Oh, yeah.
You have to get 8 to stay in it, though.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most important one is after seeing how it went on Saturday against New England, where you should have gotten a result, you have to beat them at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang, yeah. I'd agree. I honestly think they have it in them to pull 9 points out.
Yep.
You know, I'm good with that. 3 wins and a draw and a loss. You know, you kind of, especially where the team is, and like you're at home, right?
Yeah.
And so
It's
that
a
home
different
factor plays a big role, right? Even though, like Dean's mentioned, like playing away, they've got to change that mentality. Again, it feels like the team hasn't evolved in that aspect. But one of the things that we can like count on with Charlotte FC is that more likely than not, in the Dean Smith era as well, the team has been very, very strong at home.
Yep.
You know, and so these are like, again, like you mentioned, they're complicated rivals, but they're winnable games.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so they're gonna need that, you know, especially now, like the team's dropped to 7th, right? Which it was crazy, right? 2 weeks ago. But then this goes back to like MLS. 2 weeks ago, you were in the cusp of, you know, shooting for the top spot in the East. Now you're fighting for 7th place, Bryant. That's MLS.
100%. Exactly. And some of the teams that are ahead of them right now it's kind of crazy. Like DC's ahead of them right now.
That's an interesting
New
one.
England, even. I mean, New England's first year new head coach made some changes there, and they're now pushing for the top spot in the East. It's just kind of a crazy turn. That's what happens in this league. So, being able to make a quick turnaround and run of positive form. I mean, that's what this home stretch sets up for. So if they go on a positive run, which I think is absolutely the expectations, and I think there's no reason really not to. They've proven that already with their first home stretch of games. So seeing another positive home stretch sets them up well into the break.
Nice. Awesome. How much pressure do you feel like the team feels right? You know, and in terms of if you like what we're talking about here about, you know, not being able to evolve and, you know, the pressure from internally where like they can't get the results. And I feel like externally we've seen a little bit more, I guess, at least from a social media standpoint, like put the pressure up. Obviously, we saw the interaction that happened between Dean Smith and one of the fans, you know, last week, which, you know, you were right there, you know, so you know exactly what was said, correct?
Yeah, and it was just, I mean, there was a security guard there. I mean, it was enough to where, like, there were questions being asked of what was going down and what could have gone down. Now, obviously, it dissipated relatively quickly, which is a positive from all sides.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, and I not condoning any, like, that should not be how fans or coaches or anybody interact with each other when it comes to this sport. It's
absolutely,
like, it's not necessary. There's plenty of ways to vent your frustrations in our comment sections, however you want to do it. Like, but there's plenty of ways.
Engagement firing by Brian, right?
But at the same time, like, the pressure is definitely mounting, and it shouldn't. I think that's also a positive.
Me too. Yeah, I agree.
If you don't have pressure, that means you're not. DC is playing with house money and has been all year because they have no expectations because they won the wooden spoon last year. They're giving their tickets away for free. Like, there's a whole different ballpark that they're in. But when you set expectations of 50-point floor, which is what Charlotte are at, getting home field advantage, saying we're pushing for trophies, you know, we want to be the Seattle Sounders of the East, right? Those kind of things. It comes with pressure, and you should expect that, and you should also want it a little bit, ideally, if you are actually at that level, because that pressure should make you become more. I think that's regardless of whether you're not, whether you're in the soccer space or business or anything, like you should want to push for that because I think that's what makes you grow. And so I think this team now needs to show us like they can handle some of that extra pressure.
Yeah.
It should come with the territory. Like same with Tokolmadi, like that was one of our big questions. Like he's wearing the 9, that comes with extra pressure. He should want that because he chose the 9. If he didn't want that pressure, stick with 17 again. Like there's nothing, you don't have to.
That's a good point.
They didn't force him to pick the 9, right? He chose to add that extra level to what's coming. And so I think that's really the key now is like during this home stretch where the pressure's really on, that you got to be able to stop the bleeding and turn the tide. Can you step up and show that you've found you can get to that level that the pressure comes with?
Absolutely. I would add to that like situations like the one that happened against Atlanta United really shows you also, how good Dean Smith is at diffusing a situation that could like potentially like turn even more negative.
Yeah.
Like he made it sound like not a big at this, like let's move on. Right. And I think like from a media standpoint, you're going to try to put out everything that you see.
Yeah.
From a coach standpoint is like, how do I diffuse that pressure? And to me, like the way he handled it, I was like, this is pretty clever on his part. Like play it off. It's not a big deal. Guy had a 1 too many. Just mentioned that, regardless of what actually happened, I think the way he handled it is actually like, that's where you lean into a Dean Smith experience.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's a true pro, and he's been in this space for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And so, I obviously, in that specific moment, not concerned about how that interaction went. I think it's more just like how do you handle the pressure specifically on the field for me. That's the big question.
Yeah.
That's the big question. And then you can't PR your way through that.
That's fair. That's a great point. All right, let's move on to FC Cincinnati this coming up weekend. The Battle of the Queen Cities, Charlotte FC versus FC Cincinnati, who are ahead of Charlotte, but they haven't been, as great as FC Cincinnati could be, right? They sit 6th in the Eastern Conference, 4 wins, 3 draws, and 4 losses. And so, I mean, it's been a pretty bang average season for them so far. Brian, talk to us a little bit about what are we expecting from, the fake Queen City?
A little bit of chaos, to be honest. Cincinnati games have been really wild out of the gate. I know we've talked about Zaha picking up a bunch of yellows. Cincinnati have been down a man in like 3 or 4 games already this year. And then on top of that, you've had like Miles Robinson has been out for a decent portion of the season. Miazga, they still just never get to play together, even though they've been signed to Cincinnati for years now. I mean, at one point they were running like this last week. If you look at their lineup, it was like their D mid was playing left center back. They had a fullback playing right center back. They just have run out of players on their back line, and that's led to a ton of goals. They have like 25 goals against so far this year. Some of their score lines have been crazy, like 3-3, 4-4. This last week was a 3-2. So they've been giving up a lot of goals. A lot of it's been because their defenders haven't been healthy. If Robinson, Miazga, and Hagland all end up coming back, I mean, that's a completely different Cincinnati backline than what we've seen. But at the same time, they still have guys in the front. Like Evander just got a hat trick and helped them win in Chicago down a man. That's just the level that Evander has in him. So you still have to obviously be concerned about their key guys, even if they're not playing at their best. And I talked about the consistency of Dean being like a 50-point floor. Cincinnati has like a 60-point floor. That's what Noonan has provided them since he's been there. So I still believe that they're eventually going to turn it around. Ideally, it's not this weekend, but we'll see. I think it should be an exciting affair just because there's goals to be had for both teams.
Yeah, Billy, are you expecting a high-paced goal game for this match?
I hope so. It'll be interesting. The team that keeps getting red cards playing against, if they get a red card against Charlotte, Charlotte always wins with Hitler.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
Actually, that's a good shout. We've been a man up for a good amount of games too, and so we were actually joking about that. Like they need to be a man up to win, And so it should be a really good game. Right, I think for me, it's gonna like what we talked about. What are the positives that we can see from this squad in this match? I wanted to ask you guys a little bit about, the back line not having Tim Ream available potentially. Henry Kessler, like it's really sucked for him because this is where we kind of needed to see him a little bit. He's not available. Obviously, Harry Toffolo, is a player that like has been starting for Dean Smith, but we haven't like he's part of that cohesion. And when you're looking at the back line for Dean Smith, you're counting on Harry Toffolo and Tim Ream to be in the back, right? So talk to me, Brian, about those kind of players missing for this match.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously crucial, especially I think Ream, just his ability to distribute is a big miss. Privet actually showed some decent through balls in this last game. He put on there was a combination play in the first half that he helped set up when he set I think it was BL through, and so Privet honestly overall I felt like looked pretty good in this last game, and I think a big part of that is just Morrison's ability to kind of be a good partner along, whether it's Ream or Privet. I think he complements either of those guys. So I'm not super concerned with the back line. Maybe Schnegg again on the wing just because he has to deal with likely, I think it's Ekenike, who's extremely fast on that right wing. He didn't start in those last game, but if he's starting in this one, he is a extremely pacey wing back who could pose a lot of, they call him a wing back, but he's a forward. He's just in Cincinnati. He plays wing back because that's where you put him. And so I think that could easily pose a problem on that side, whether it was Toffolo or Schnegg. So I think that's one of the areas that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. And then I still feel confident in Byrne on the right hand side. I think backline should be okay.
Yeah.
Should be
Billy,
okay.
for me, a concern is that like even though they improved this weekend, especially the center backs, they're young guys who have this season made blunders as well, right? And so that's where like I feel like those blunders that they could potentially make, you give a ball to a guy like Evander, like you mentioned, like the game changes and it can change really fast. And so from a backline perspective, how concerned are you, if any?
I would be a little concerned just because of Evander. Like you said, it's like we've seen guys take advantage of just small little mistakes, like if Privet steps or if someone else steps and it leaves space. Evander is the person I would be, one of the people I would be most scared of taking advantage of that across the entire league. So they need to be extremely sound and not leave any small spaces. Obviously, there's going to be some across the game, but you can't have that happen when Evander is in a dangerous area to where one step means he now has a look on goal from a goal score, like an area where he can score from.
No, actually, I think and this is how Dean kind of sets things up. He always points out, like, hey, they're not shooting from dangerous areas. They're shooting from outside of the box and things like that. And he sets the team up to kind of allow space outside of the box and tighten up inside of the box. Evander can score from anywhere. And so I think that's one interesting point, and we'll see how it kind of plays out. And Evander has been very close to putting up a bunch of goals against Dean Smith's Charlotte in the past. Like, I think he hit the crossbar, I think it was either last year or the year before. I remember just him having like 6 or 7 chances and a bunch of chances created. And Evander doesn't care where he shoots. Like, if you give him space from 25 yards out, 10 yards out, he won't care. Like, he can score from anywhere. And so I think that might be one interesting factor. Like you said, like, Charlotte's defense might play up to what Dean expects or wants, give them the ball outside of the box in less dangerous areas. And for Evander, it's just not the same. Like, that's not a safe place.
That's still a dangerous area.
It's extremely still a dangerous area, especially if you've got space. And so I think that could end up being how this game plays out. And then I think it sets up for an interesting post press conference discussion with Dean. Is like, hey, if you allow space outside of the box, like, are there certain players you just can't allow any space no matter what? And I think this is what this game kind of sets up for.
Yeah, for sure. And I also wanted to discuss a little bit about Wilfred Zaha. Obviously, we saw him back this past weekend, and to a similar fashion to Wilfred Zaha, you have the good of him, but you also have the negative side of Wilfred Zaha. And I know Tom posted today that talks are still ongoing, but as I continue to mention, like, it's, from what I understand, this is more PR for this deal is not going to happen, unless there is an extreme change, and I'm gonna say it more on Wilfred Zaha's side than Charlotte FC. He's not coming back. Anyways, with that being said, like, how can you get the best out of Wilfred Zaha these last couple of games that he's gonna be here at Charlotte FC, Brian?
Yeah, I honestly think that's a really tough question. I mean, I think he's a professional who will keep showing up because that's what Dean has always said. He shows up. That's how he shows up. Like he does the job because he knows it's also not just the sport he loves, but it's the job he signed up for. And unlike the Karol Swiderski situation, where it seemed like going into that winter, there was a disconnect in terms of him wanting to be a part of the club and wanting to go back to Europe and kind of a little bit of a back and forth. And so Dean was just like, make this happen, figure out how to make this happen for him and for the club and everything.
Right.
It doesn't seem like that's what's happening here because otherwise I feel like we would have already seen Dean stop playing him because I do think like Dean at the end of the day is a culture guy who kind of demands like, you got to be a part of the group, and you've got to be willing to play in this 11, and you got to be bought into what we're doing as a project. I do feel like, and I feel like Dean is a guy who would not play Zaha if he didn't feel like that was the case.
Absolutely.
I do still trust in him doing that. So at this point, he's still bought in to at least finish out his contract and do what he needs to do, whether like the goal is just like, hey, help this team get 10 points and set themselves up for the next stage, or whatever that goal may be that they've communicated. But it seems like at least at this point, they're still clearly willing to put up with some of his antics when it doesn't go well, like in this last game against New England.
Yeah.
They still are willing to defend him. Ashley's still defending him in the post-match press conference that this is the Zaha we want because maybe he's mad and it draws a yellow. But at the same time, these are the goals that you get from him because he's of that attitude. So it's like, how do you balance those two situations?
Yeah, and I mean, in his time in Charlotte, like, I'm just expecting that, you know? Like, it's just, like what Tom said, he's Wilfred Zaha. Like, this is just who you're going to get. You're going to get the best in both. At this age, he's not changing, Billy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting the goals and assists out of him, you're not going to care if you're getting the yellows that much, especially if he's leaving in the summer. Like, you don't care at this point if he gets a yellow. Just go out there, score goals, assist goals, get results. That's what you need from him as of right now. So
yeah, and so I would say that I think, like you mentioned, on the positive side of those things, you know, I think Wilfred Zaha has that level of professionalism. There's like an unspoken agreement between both Charlotte and Wilfred, because if he comes out and says, "Well, I'm not going to be here anymore," like that just sets up a very like sour tone for these last couple of games. Right. And like you mentioned, like Dean really values, you know, that harmony within the team, you know. And so it'll be very interesting how a couple of these things play out. Obviously, again, also speaking of DPs, we saw links, you know, again to the championship for Liel Abada with Norwich City, and then Birmingham also in for him. Brian, is this the time Liel Abada goes?
I mean, it's the last chance that Charlotte would have, and I would be even surprised that they can get any kind of transfer fee out of him coming. I mean, it's technically the last window before his contract expires, and at this point, after this summer, I'm pretty sure clubs can negotiate directly with the player. They don't have to necessarily wait. Now, I guess if you technically get a bidding war between two championship clubs, you can then require a transfer fee, but if there's not a huge amount of bids out there, they can kind of just wait till the winter. That's kind of what the situation looked like it was going to be with Trent Alexander-Arnold, and then Real Madrid just decided, like, you know, we're like guaranteeing that we're getting him, and so then they paid a little bit. So like that's kind of what you need. Otherwise, you can like, if there's not a huge bid for him, like, and there's just not a ton of interest, clubs can just wait out the contract. So I think if you're Charlotte and you can move on. And Zoran has already mentioned, like, this summer window is possible. Like, there's a lot of possibility here that there hasn't been in the past because it's a World Cup window, first window that MLS is lined up with the big leagues. So all these different factors kind of playing into, and it's more games after, so more teams are motivated to bring in a summer signing because you got 19 games to play after the season comes back, and so there's a lot of reasons to take up that chance and open up a DP spot. So even if you get a low fee, loan out, whatever it kind of takes to open up a DP spot. And I think that also plays into the Zaha situation too. It's like, well, having two DP spots open in what would be ideally the biggest summer window for MLS and for Charlotte specifically, like there's also value in that.
Absolutely.
And so I think you take almost any bid you can get to get Abada off your roster.
Absolutely, yeah. And like you mentioned, I'd imagine at this point, like, hey, just agree on, moving Leo Labata on. We talked about this at the beginning of the year. We'd seen it for 2 years. We've been patient, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is he just hasn't delivered at Charlotte FC. And if you can't deliver at DP, you're always going to have more expectations. Again, like we have the expectations higher now for Toklomati because he's wearing the 9.
Yep.
The expectations for DPs is through the roof.
Yeah.
Right? Especially in a league like this. I would also say from Leo Labata's standpoint, if championship sides are interested in him, it makes sense for him to want to start with a full preseason in a team in the championship versus trying to go mid-year, in the middle of the season, right? The next window. So missing out on his last 6 months of Charlotte FC contract, or heck, maybe he can still pull the money out of them, that all goes into contract talks and situations like that. But I'd imagine for his sake, he would want to try to do the best going into his next team.
Yeah, 100%. And give himself a fresh start because he's still young. He's like 24,
Yeah.
25. He hasn't hit his prime yet either. So I think it also benefits him. And he even talked about it in that interview he did last year where it's like he would have liked to just get minutes and go on loan, but like Charlotte didn't let him, is what he said. So I think he even was just ready to can I just find minutes somewhere and just give myself a chance? Because, a career and an opportunity, you have a short window to make this thing happen. And so I think for him also, it's just, I think all sides are ready for this.
I think the fans are too, given our comment section.
Yeah.
Billy, Leo Labata, you want him to stay?
No, definitely not. He's not produced.
He's not ready to comment farm like that yet.
Nice. Honestly, any, I guess, positives or anything else that you could see from Leo Labata, I guess, moving him on?
Moving him on, for him, like was mentioned, him getting a preseason. Like when he came here, he didn't get a preseason. It was a late move. It was in March, I believe, so he missed out on that. I don't think he's going to want to move after a preseason again. So being able to get in there with his new team immediately and have that preseason it would help him more than you're going to get a preseason eventually the next year anyway. But that first year is when people are going to form their opinion on you, and it's hard to shake that. And I think it's been hard for him to shake his performance for the first year. It wasn't probably what he wanted, obviously, and I don't think it's been what he's wanted since. And it definitely hasn't been what Charlotte or the fans have wanted either.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be a very interesting window this summer, right? And so I'd imagine they better have a Mo Salah-esque type of sign. That's what would make me have that. I'd be like, okay, now we know why there was so much secrecy. But if I see some player from FK Kukuriki, right, come in, who's supposed to be, because, and fair to them, they have to, sell what they're bringing in. Because one of the things that was mentioned when Leo Labata came was, this is the advantage of the MLS window closing later, right? That you're able to pull Leo Labata because he doesn't have more options right now and he needs to get out of Celtic. Remember, that was a big push of hey, this being our big window. But then they flipped it in the summer saying, well, we can't get the other guys because the window gets closed.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's salesmanship from Zorn and these guys, which I understand you got to do it, right? But at the end of the day, you have to deliver. And for me, delivering is a quality DP. And if it's a no-name guy, that guy better produce from the get-go.
Yeah. Well, but even the whole mid-market thing is kind of becoming more of a bit of a farce now too. Thomas Muller just went to Vancouver. Timo Werner went to San Jose. These are big deals.
Yeah.
And
James.
Griezmann to Orlando.
Yeah.
Orlando's a decent spot. In terms of just location and stuff like that. But it's not Miami. It's not the same draw. I don't think as many people in Europe know Orlando versus Miami. It's not the same, right? It's just so a lot of these smaller markets, maybe the little brother markets of the big markets, are starting to find ways to draw bigger names. And so as that continues to happen, I mean, the pressure then also mounts on Charlotte being like, hey, why aren't you marketing yourself in that same way? Like, these other teams are finding a way to do it. Vancouver didn't even they were for sale when they got like Thomas Muller. Like, the club
That's a great point.
They still might not even be in Vancouver. They might go to Vegas now.
Yeah, well, maybe
and he's still bought in.
Maybe Mueller knew that they were going to Vegas,
Like,
and maybe he bet on them going to Vegas. Nah. We do not condone that here on the Top in 90 show. Throw a little legal advertisement at the bottom. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, that's a fair point. The more we see bigger name players go to places that aren't Miami, New York, or LA, the more I'm going to question, like, okay, well, these mid markets, as you mentioned, are getting these like better caliber players, right? I think Hamas to Minnesota is the one that stands out to me the most, right? Like, this is like, if you ask me where I think what MLS team James Rodriguez was going to end up at, I would have never told you Minnesota United. Given that market, given how cold it is, you know, given his previous experience at a place like Bayern as well, you know, and so, everything is shaping up to be a very interesting summer for Charlotte FC. Let's see how it plays out. You know, I'm hoping they've got a big ace under their card, right? But again, like, even when they do that in the past, like, oh, you're getting linked with somebody great, and then something else happens where it's just like, well, there was so much hype, and then it died down.
Yeah, I do think the hype should be real just in terms of how the market is setting up. If you look at the amount of free agents or players that are announcing they're going to be free agents, it's a crazy list. We've already posted one article about it, and we'll probably be posting more. But, I mean, you mentioned Mo Salah earlier, but like Sadio Mane, Bernardo Silva, Julian Brandt, and that's just off the top of my head, but there's at least 10 or 15 names that have already come out and announced they're going to be free agents. So maybe it's not even just those names, but what that shakes up in the market is because those guys are going to go to new clubs and then shake up those teams, and then players drop out of those rosters, and so there's just a trickle-down effect that influences the entire world transfer market.
Absolutely.
So there's hype. I mean, it's real.
Listen, Sadio Mane hasn't signed a new deal yet with...
and he's coming to Charlotte.
That's what I was about to say, you know, and they talked about these players, like, threw that random offer at Luka Modric, throw it again at Sadio. Hey, it's a nice stadium. So I'm be like, would you like to play here? Oh, man. With that said, Billy, give us your little score predictions for FC Cincinnati this weekend.
I'm going to go 2-2.
Okay. That feels like a safe answer. Who's scoring the goals for you?
I'm going to go with the Pep Biel brace.
Nice. Okay. Brian?
3-2 Charlotte.
Okay.
Cincinnati has a red card. And Toklo and Biel.
Oh, nice. Okay. Kind of, I would say arguably the three best players for Charlotte FC.
Yeah. Three most important players that all need a goal.
Yeah, they all. Yeah, it's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with a 1-1 as well. Like, I'd say Toklo gets a goal, and then I think Ander Banger.
Nice.
You know, and so that will just dampen the mood for Charlotte. And so, but I've been extremely wrong these last 2 weeks, so hopefully, you know, we see a 4-0 win, you know. Yeah. But I'm going with a 1-1. Yeah. So
playing the psychological games.
I have to now, where 2 weeks ago we could be top of the East. Now we're in thank goodness there's no relegation in MLS. So with that said, Billy, where can people find you at?
You can find me on socials at I am Billy McGee, and you can find me written content on Top in 90, College Soccer News, and Culture.
Love it, love it. Brian, where can people find you at?
Yeah, on X at Bam Bam, Mauer Media, written content, topin90.com, College Soccer News, everywhere. You got it.
Nice. Jorge Gonzalez, we're Top Bin 90 on all our social medias. And with that, episode 60 of the Top Bin 90 podcast is over and out. Thank you guys. Good.